Hi, my name is Stephanie Sosa, and my opponent stated that the California High School exit exam is unnecessary, but my claim would be that the KC is actually necessary. Her justification was that as California high school students graduate, they are required to take the California High School exit exam as a standard to measure if they are eligible to graduate. But rather, I found from the California Department of Education that the KC is not to determine whether or not students graduate, but whether or not they are eligible to, whether or not they can demonstrate grade level competency in reading, writing, and mathematics. The KC helps identify students who are not developing the skills that are essential for life after high school. And that's the key point, is life after high school. Because the KC's goal was not to determine whether or not these students were able to graduate, but whether or not they were able to go into the life after high school. Whether or not they were going to finish high school was unimportant. Also, the Department of Education states that the test originated to improve the academic performance index and to meet federal no child left behind requirements. This has nothing to do with whether or not you graduate high school, which was the main justification and the main claim, as my opponent says. The first claim that she put was that the standards presented by the test do not adequately reflect if one is academically sound in reading, writing, and mathematics. And it goes again to my original statement, was that it's not based on whether or not you're going to graduate, but whether or not you are able to go into life after high school. The English language assessment, which is part of the KC, tests on grades through the 10th grade. And students that are in the 10th grade in most high schools are now applicable to take AP English, which is equivalent to, or which is, college level English. And students that don't plan to go to higher education do not need to go to AP English, where they learn how to use different types of vocabulary, such as pathos, egos, or logos, because simply they need to be able to communicate, write, and that's all they really need if they don't want to get higher education. It specifically states that in the English language assessment, this includes vocabulary, decoding, comprehension, analysis of information, and literary text. In writing, this covers writing strategies, applications, and conventions of English, of which these are the basis for what you need to do and what you need to survive in our society. In specific, also the mathematics grades level 6, 7, and Algebra 1, which includes statistics, data analysis, probability, algebra, some arithmetic, decimals, fractions, and percents, none of which are necessary when you need to go to, none of which are not already planned when you are in high school. Because when you go to high school, they not only have that you graduate with completing the high school exam, but you also have to complete different requirements. Which leads to her second point, which is that the material learned in the classroom should hold higher value than this test does, and determine if the student should proceed up to form of graduation. For probably the third time, the KC is not to determine if a student graduates, and the material learned in the classroom does actually hold higher value than what the KC depicts. Because, for example, the LAUSD, which is a school district of Los Angeles, needs 30 credits of history, which is equivalent to 3 years, 40 credits of English, 20 credits of math, 20 credits of science, and remaining 120 credits of extracurricular activities such as electives and physical education, performing arts. This means that students have to go higher above than the regular English and math that what the KC needs or actually tests for. So schools do hold higher value than what the KC does. And thirdly, my opponent said that the cost outweighs the benefits. And I say that we have to spend some money in order to earn some. Because if we have a bus society full of students that do not know how to do basic math, do not know how to do basic speaking or reading skills, then you're not going to go anywhere. Because our society is based on our economy, and our economy is based on technology and learning and being able to communicate with other people. So finally, the KC is necessary because it identifies students that are in most need of our education system. These students are not adequately prepared to succeed in a world based on math and English if they do not pass the KC.
And Stephanie, you speak very clearly, and it's well organized, but there are a couple of places where you had these long statements about the potential conflict that's going on here, where it sounds sometimes like you're summarizing the idea, sometimes you're evaluating the idea, and occasionally you're contrasting it with this counterclaim, and I'm not exactly sure what inference you want us to draw as a result of the comparison that's being made. Now, there was one thing that came up repeatedly that I thought was an important point for you, and that was that the CASI is not required in order to graduate. And I thought, okay, well, that's good. So graduation is a separate requirement. Calling it a graduate exam is not necessary because it doesn't prevent anybody from graduating. I do need to see the evidence that says that you don't have to pass the CASI to get your diploma and get out of high school. I mean, I know they're not going to keep you in high school if you don't pass it. But that's the idea, right? They can still, they still graduate, they still get their diploma and everything. It's not an impediment to them graduating. It's only an evaluation if they have these basic skills. So that's the point you're trying to make, right? Yeah, so I think you needed that piece of data there. And that answers the one point that the advocate kept bringing up. The argument, for instance, you got into this argument about what the standards are, and you mentioned the AP English class and what they would be able to do. It shows you that you are at this particular level. Okay, well, how does the CASI help that, or how would getting rid of it hinder that? I couldn't tell what your argument was there. I got a nice summary of what the issues are involved, but I couldn't quite figure out what inference you wanted us to draw after you had talked about that issue, and I think that that's a little bit problematic. I think the third point, though, is the clearest argument, because you, in essence, say, in fact, the graduation requirements and what they're supposed to do in school clearly does exceed the CASI. Look, the standards are fairly low in CASI. You have to complete 3 years of English and 2 years of math and whatever number of units of this, that, and the other thing in order to graduate. So those are pretty high standards, and the CASI you just have to pass the test, which is at 8th or 10th grade level, that sort of thing. What you need to be doing is coming back and pointing out that the CASI is supposed to work in conjunction with graduation to indicate that people are prepared to function, like you said, out in the workforce. And I think that you needed to have some information that suggests, why did they adopt it originally? They adopted it originally because you had a lot of people who were graduating from high school who couldn't read or write or do a lick of math. And so if an employer is looking at somebody's diploma and say, oh, they graduated from Buena Park High School, they must be able to do those kinds of things, but there wasn't any way to tell it except that they had completed the requirements and they graduated, then the employers might be making a bad investment in the employees, or somebody's getting a job that they can't really do. There's some problem like that. Whereas conversely, if you have both pieces of information, then they've completed their requirements and they can work at this particular level, and that's what this test means, that they work at a minimum at this level, and that's really the value there. There's not a lot of information on any of these points that is affirmative for the CASI, just mostly descriptive of what it's intended to do. And the analysis of the advocate's argument, I think most of the time you're just kind of summarizing points that they're making without explaining what's wrong with their argument or why the position you're taking is so much more meaningful. So both of the, it seems a little abstract sometimes what it is we're supposed to get out of this, and that should be clearer.